Hey there. Let's chat about tight hips or feeling like the need to stretch your hips. So oftentimes it's not actually, I mean, your hips are tight, but that's stretching is not the solution. So sometimes the solution is movement. We'll go through a couple of movements here. And what I mean by movement is moving the pelvis. So because the hips are a part of the pelvis, we want to make sure that our pelvis is moving well. So we're going to do some pelvic tilts. And then the pelvis is connected to the spine. So we want to make sure that the spine is moving well. So we're going to do some bridges. And with the bridges, we're going to move the spine, but also kind of check in to see if the glutes are engaging, because sometimes if the glutes are not engaging, which is very common for people, especially if you sit a lot, or if you have sat a lot in the past and now you don't sit that much, sometimes the glutes just turn off and it's hard to, you have to kind of intentionally turn them back on. So we'll do that and then do some other kind of movements just to get the glutes engaged, but also the hips kind of lubricated. So the way the femur bone sits in the hip socket, and sometimes we don't move it in a three-dimensional way, just in our everyday life, especially like if we walk on concrete or something like that, or something where you're mostly going forward. You don't have to step out of you know you're not like jumping off rocks and whatever. So that we get a little bit more movement through our hips, which is especially good if you ski or hike or, all those things that where we go from this forward movement to something that's a little bit more three-dimensional. Okay, so starting with laying down on our backs, and here you're laying down on your back and you in this hip knee second toe alignment. And what I mean by that is hip bone, knee, and second toe. So if you created this straight line, sort of like railroad tracks there. And one of the big things that Pilates is about is breathing. So not only are we going to get movement here, but also breathing to help engage the deep abdominals, to recruit some of the muscles through the torso, which will serve you just in your everyday life too. So you might as well get movement and focus on our breathing. So starting with a pelvic tilt, which is an arch through the low back, and then an inhale through the nose as you're arching. And then as you exhale, feel like the low belly kind of pulls up towards the ribs and you're imprinting into the mat and exhaling out through the mouth as you do this. So it's an inhale, arch through the nose, and then exhale, feeling that pull up and the ribs kind of hug in as you imprint to the mat. And here, you want to work in a range where you feel comfortable. If there's any like twingy pain, then don't do it. But if it feels like kind of this pull / stretch, that's okay. Because we are giving a nice gentle massage with this movement to our low back, which if you're having hip tightness, sometimes the low back will also suffer. So this is great for getting the low back moving. Inhale, feeling the ribs expand out to the side, and then exhale, ribs hug in as you kind of pull up. And if you can't feel this kind of rib expanding and rib drawing in, that movement through the ribs, that's okay. Just keep coming back to it, and each time seeing if there's a difference between the ribs moving, all that good stuff. Okay, so now we're going to progress this movement. So it's going to start out the same way. Inhale, arching, exhale, imprinting, but instead of pausing with our hips down, we're going to begin to lift our tailbone and hips up off of the mat nice and slowly, pressing through the heels and until you get to the top. And when you get to the top, you don't want your to be arched like this. It's more of this kind of tail is reaching long, sit bones, which are the kind of the bones right in the middle of the butt there. They are sitting, they're reaching long, inhaling at the top, and then exhale, nice and slow, coming down vertebrae by vertebrae. And this movement, especially the first couple times, might feel sticky. So inhale, arching, exhale, imprinting. And what I mean by sticky, it's like almost like your spine wants to move in chunks. And that's okay, especially if you haven't really done this type of movement before. But each time you kind of move through this articulation through the spine, seeing if you can move a little bit slower through some of those chunky parts, or pause for a second, take an inhale, and then exhale, and then continue through the articulation. So you're kind of pausing in the middle of that chunky part, and then inhaling, and then coming back up. So using your breath as a tool to help your movement. So 2 more up and downs here. Inhale, and then exhale. Inhale to reset and arch, and exhale to imprint. Good, 1 more here. Checking with your hips, we want to feel like the hips are staying nice and parallel. And that's not for like aesthetic reasons. It's not for like, oh, we want this movement to look nice. It's more about control and stability through the hips. So if you feel like one side is dipping more than the other, maybe that side is not firing like it should, the little muscles are not supporting. So kind of find that evenness, and you can play around with this. Movement is all about playing around with how your body feels and how it moves. And it could change day to day. So if you're at the top of this bridge here, let's do a little bit of movement to fire up the glutes. So I'm going to lift one heel. Let's say I'm lifting my left heel but keeping my left toes on the ground. And now I'm lifting my right toes and flexing them towards the knee and keeping the heel on the mat. So taking an inhale, lower the hips just an inch or 2, and then exhale to lift up. And again, we want this you don't want to arch your back. So it's not really about how far up you can get your hips. It's more about keeping the hips nice and parallel, feeling the glute engage, maybe through the right side, but maybe also through the left. Inhale, they may engage a little bit different. The left calf might engage a little bit more. Inhale, exhale. Let's go 2 more. Good job. Inhale to lower down. Exhale to lift. Last one. Perfect. From there, feet are parallel again. Inhale, exhale, rolling down. This is a nice opportunity to articulate through the spine, but also kind of reset everything. So if there's any tension through the low back or kind of unwanted tightness through the hips, you can just reset everything here. So the side left toes are going to flex, heel grounds, and then right heel lifts, right toes spread wide and ground. Checking in with the hips. And so I have my elbows here for a little bit of extra support, but I can bring the side of my hands to my hips here just to give a little bit of feedback on how they are parallel. So inhale, lower down an inch or 2, exhale to lift. Coming into these pulses, still in this hip knee second toe alignment. Inhale, filling the back of the lungs, and then exhale, lifting, feeling that low belly pull towards the ribs. Inhale, ribs expand. Exhale, hugging in so the torso supports this movement. Last 2. And last 1. Good. Coming back to parallel, ground the hips, taking an inhale, and then exhale, slowly rolling down. So if through that movement you really didn't feel like your glutes were kicking on, see about kind of giving them like a little tap. So for example, in this position, I'm there, if it's more my hamstring that's working, I just give a little tap with the knuckle and see if I can fire them up. So if through that movement, if you don't feel like the glutes were kicking on, rewind to kind of the start of the bridging and seeing if you can give the glutes a little bit of encouragement to kick on. All right, the next thing we're going to do is spin on over to quadruped. And so in quadruped, you can either be on your hands. I like being on my hands, but if you have tender wrists and it's hard for you to hold this position for very long, you can come down onto your elbows. So in this position, we're going to be moving our leg through space and getting a little bit of kind of three-dimensional movement through the hip. But something I want you to notice is that as we start to move our leg through space, we're not dropping the torso or arching the back or tipping our tail up towards the ceiling. We want to feel like we have a little bit of there's this neutral spine position, which is the small curvature of the low back and the backs of the ribs, almost like they have little wires attached to them and they're pulling up towards the ceiling. So we'll start with the right leg, taking an inhale and to prepare, and then on your exhale, arcing the leg up to kind of high five the ceiling. Inhale down, and I'm just tapping my knee a little bit behind where I started, and this hopefully allows the hips to stay nice and even. So if I bring my knee all the way back in, I kind of have to hike my hip a little bit, and I want to avoid that. Inhale, exhale to lift, keeping the head long through the spine there. Inhale down, exhale up. 2 more. So we're resisting gravity and going slow through this movement. So with all of these movements, the juiciness is in the speed. So it's not only the movement, but it's how fast you do it. And here we're going for slow speed because we want to move through this whole hip joint. We want to activate the glutes, all that good stuff. Okay, so now moving into our second movement, which are circles here. And so my torso is staying completely still, and I'm just stirring that leg bone in the hip socket. And this may feel really challenging, but it's great for activating the glutes and those little stabilizer muscles through the hips. Let's do one more this direction. Good. And then reverse. Good. Continuing to breathe, inhaling through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth. And then last one. We're going to bring the knee back into parallel. Give a little tail wag. Check in with the low back, making sure it's not arched. Taking an inhale and lifting into this hydrant lift. And this is a hydrant, we call it a hydrant lift because it looks like a dog kind of lifting its leg to mark its territory on the hydrant there. The quintessential dog move. And as you're moving through these movements, you may feel like the standing leg, that side is also working, which is the kind of one of the beauties of this movement of the single leg. Last one. Good. And the last thing we're going to do is extend the leg straight. And if your wrists are starting to get tired, you can come down onto your elbows. Actually, let's just come down onto our elbows. And we're gonna come into these big rainbow arcs. So taking an inhale, exhale to lift. And my hips might move a little bit here, but notice that my tail is reaching long. I'm not lowering my ribs towards the mat at all and still have that lift, kind of a smiling the collarbones wide. And as you're moving, we want to feel like where the glute meets the hamstring, so like right here is what is initiating the lift. So our knee is straight. Sometimes if we bend our knee, we end up having a little bit more hamstring than we want. So leg is straight. So the femur bone, the upper leg bone can articulate in the hip socket. Let's do 2 more. Good. And last one. From here, we're going to spin around and go to the other side. And so, starting on our arms there, taking an inhale and then exhale, arcing up, letting our knee tap just behind where it started. Exhale, lift. So this side might feel completely different than the other, and that's okay, especially if you're experiencing tightness or pain through your hip, because when there is a pain response, the body kind of says, all right, I gotta protect whatever it is that is sending the message of pain. So that's one of the reasons why movement is kind of nice to maybe solve that, because stretching, it might feel good in the moment, but in the long run, it doesn't necessarily solve the issue of maybe a little bit of imbalance through the hips or weakness in an area. Last one, coming into circles. So up, opening the knee, resisting gravity as you come down. Exhale to lift, inhale to lower. So with this breath pattern, I always think about exhaling, which is where you kind of recruit the stability through the torso. That's when you do the exhale on the harder part, because we are going against gravity, so we want our torso to be nice and stable for our leg to move off of. Reversing directions here. So coming down, opening up, spinning the leg bone. Inhale, exhale. Making sure that this shoulder is drawn down, and if you need to, come down onto your elbows. Inhale, exhale. Good. Last 2, just stirring the leg bone in the hip socket there. And last one. Good. Now from there, coming into that hydrant lift, pretending you're just the cutest little dog walking down the street, wants to mark its turf. Inhale to come in, exhale to lift. Good. Last 2. And last one. From there, coming down onto your elbows, keeping the collarbones nice and wide, head stays in alignment, so even if we're tired, we're not letting our chin come towards our chest. Inhale, exhale, step 1 foot long. Inhale, exhale, lifting. And nice. Using the breath to help lift the leg, right where that glute meets the hamstring. So the hamstring isn't working to do all the heavy lifting. Last 2. And last one. Good. Coming into a tail wag there, sitting back into child's pose, and shrugging the shoulders up, shrugging the shoulders down. From there, we're going to come into a kneeling position. Oh, actually, I want to say one more thing. So that movement that we just did in the quadruped position, if you feel like it's too much, through the arms, then you can come down to a chair and set up your mat so your knees are supported and have your elbows on the chair and come into the movement that way. So you can get all your circles here, and then circle, and then open. So that is a solution if it's really not working with either being on the floor or being fully on the floor, that sort of thing. Okay, so the next movement we're going to do is this kind of lower down of the hips towards the heels and then lift back up. So here I want to keep this neutral spine. So inhaling, keeping this little curvature of our low back, and then exhale to come up. And as I'm leaning down, I want my glutes to kind of kick on and give me some support as I lower down towards my heels, and then exhale to lift up. Sometimes I like to get my hands involved. Good. Last two. And last one. Okay, so for you, we're gonna bring our leg out to the side like this. I'm gonna show you the side view. And but you just want the biggest reason to have your leg out on the mat is you just want the inner border of your foot to be nice and comfortable. So it's the same setup, imagining if you have headlights on your hips here. We're gonna lean forward, keeping this length through the torso, so I'm in this neutral spine, not rounding. So, and bringing my heel or my tail towards my heel, and then lifting up. Inhale to lower, and as I'm lowering down, I'm working in the range that my inner thigh will allow. So you'll hopefully feel right away that this is both movement through the standing leg, but also a stretch through the inner thigh. And the goal here is to not go down as far as you can. It's more about keeping the hip drawing back towards the heel as you come down. And so you're not kind of shifting to get a little bit more range. So like shifting like this, that's not our goal. The goal is to stay in this kind of parallel alignment and then lift and lower. Inhaling to come down. And sometimes I like to bring my hand to my low back as I'm coming down, just to give myself a little bit of feedback, to remind myself not to arch too much, to keep my tail heavy. So my back of my hand is on there, and then my front of my hand is on my low belly to encourage that to kind of help with the movement. All right, come back in, other side. So this is what it looks like from the beginning. The pinky toe is drawn towards the knees, taking an inhale, sitting back, and then exhale to come up. And if any of this causes pain or discomfort, don't do it. But the difference between a stretch and then pain, that's kind of for you to decide. And just because I tell you to do something doesn't mean that it's right for you. So these are all just kind of suggestions and ways to maybe kind of get your hip moving, and you're strengthening and also giving a little bit of stretch. So it's this really supported stretch. So good. Last two. And this is what it looks like from this side. And last one. Perfect. From there, we're going to do a couple roll downs through the spine. And because, even though we're focusing on the hip, the spine, sometimes if the spine's not moving well, it will show up in the hips, or vice versa. So if the hips aren't moving very well, the spine will start to kind of get that tightness or chunkiness. So taking an inhale, Sitting the tail down as we reach the hands up, and then we're gonna press the backs of our hands together as we straighten up and dive down. So once the hands get to the lowest point, inhale, reaching up, kind of gathering up all that goodness, and then exhale, pressing the backs of the hands to dive down. Last two. Inhale and exhale. And then last one. Good job. And coming on up. Nice job. Give me a shout with questions. Let me know how it goes, and see you soon.